So we're going to talk about Kennedy's presidency, the end of the Cold War, and everything that happened during the presidency of Kennedy. Everything started in the Bay of Pigs, a place in Cuba, in which the CIA invaded in 1961 because Cuba started becoming communist because of Fidel Castro. So the CIA invaded and financed weapons so that the people in Cuba took out Fidel Castro, but they didn't because Castro was already prepared with his own army. After the invasion failed, Kennedy's perception of the US Army changed a lot because he realized that the army only had their own plans and they only wanted Kennedy, so that he approved the plans, which were only to invade other places and to gain power so that communism didn't take over the world. So the army started to hate Kennedy because he rejected many plans, and one of them was the proposal to send American forces to Laos so that they could invade the place, so that they could prevent the domino effect, which meant that communism taking over the world, starting from Russia. But in 1962, there was a peace conference in which Kennedy and Khrushchev, the president of Russia, agreed on making a neutral place, of making Laos a neutral place, because it was fighted from both countries. So they both agreed on making a neutral. So as time passed, Kennedy seemed more weak to the eyes of the army, and in a meeting in 1961 between Khrushchev and Kennedy, Khrushchev asked for Berlin because many people were migrating to the other side, looking for better conditions, and he also wanted the capital of Germany because he feared that Germany could attack him again, because they had nuclear weapons that were from the United States. But Kennedy denied because he would seem weak, more weak, and he reacted by placing more weapons and more army in the capital. So that's the reason of the Berlin Wall, because there was a lot of tension between two sides. So Khrushchev decided to build a wall, and the military of the US expected Kennedy to do something about it, but he said that a wall was better than a war.
Then Operation Ortsac was a rehearsal invasion from the US to an island, but of course Cuba knew they were practicing to invade them after. Besides the Cuban invasion, the USA already had problems with Vietnam because of the invasion. Kennedy opted to make a guerrilla war in Vietnam, which is a local war between the Vietnamese people, so the USA wasn't directly involucrated. They supplied with weapons and resources for local people, even though the USA troops weren't acting. Kennedy decided to send more troops, and he also opted to use Agent Orange, which was a chemical weapon that was thrown in the jungle and killed the guerrilla armies. It also had environmental effects and even affected the civils.
So after this, the Cuban Missile Crisis started in October of 1962, when Russia put nuclear weapons on Cuba because USA had nuclear weapons in Turkey, so it was like fair. But even though that the weapons that USA put in Cuba weren't even ready to launch, USA was really scared because they could fire them, and they didn't know that they weren't ready.
USA was about to take action and invade Cuba, but it was a risk since Russia and Cuba wanted to attack the USA. But if they didn't take action, they would seem weak and other countries would start to get nuclear weapons.
So Kennedy opted to make a temporary solution, and he made a blockade around Cuba so no one could enter or go out from the country. And this would prevent any conflict between the Russians, since any ship could enter or any plane could go out or anything that could make a conflict. So one of the most dangerous moments in the crisis was when a Russian ship entered the blockade range. So another US ship started to pursue it, and it fired bombs to the water so that the Russian ship stopped. But accidentally, the bombs from the US ship hit a submarine, a Russian submarine that contained nuclear weapons. But the US ship didn't knew that the submarine was there. So the ones in the submarine thought that the war had started. So they were about to fire a nuclear bomb, but a Russian general in the submarine gave the order to not fire, so he could have saved maybe the
The
war.
missile crisis was solved by USA taking away their nuclear weapons in Turkey, and Russia taking the ones in Cuba. And USA would seem weak, so they agreed with Russia to say that they would take the bombs to maintenance, but they won't return them. If USA or Russia would have take action on any circumstance, the consequences will result in a World War III.
So after Khrushchev and Kennedy agreed on taking out the bombs from Cuba and Turkey, the Russian military reacted against Khrushchev and he was fired because he was too weak to be the Russian president.
Kennedy in Vietnam wanted peace because he knew and he saw many people were killed, Vietnamese and USA troops, and saw that there was not getting a good solution. So he decided to take out the troops from Vietnam.
So after all the conflicts between Russia and USA, Kennedy decided that if a man went to the moon, it shouldn't be the result of a competition that was the space race between Russia and USA. So basically, the space race was stopped, and USA didn't send anyone to space during some time.
Kennedy, during his presidency, he challenged the military because he never approved his plans for invading other countries because he wanted peace instead of a war.
So basically, all the US government wanted Kennedy's death. So he was assassinated on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. And Lee Harvey Oswald was blamed for his assassination. So Kennedy was shot twice. But that couldn't actually happen because it would have been a magic bullet, because Oswald was on a building and was giving the back to Kennedy, and Kennedy received 2 shots, one in the forehead. So even though Oswald shot once Kennedy, there should have been someone else that shot Kennedy in the forehead.
Well, thanks for watching. This is a communication from Osvaldo and Diego.